What's up, and welcome to the Affinity Designer Quick Start Guide. I hope that you are doing good. I hope you're doing well. You look good. I'm doing swell myself. Thank you so much for asking. So listen, I tried to fit as much as I could, as quickly as I could, as clearly as I could, so you can get up and running in Designer as soon as possible. So right now you might be like this, but soon you'd be like this. So let's get into this. Let's get started. And off we go. Okay, so let's start by creating a new document. I've got Designer loaded up, and to do this, we're just going to go up to File, and we're going to select New. When you do that, you're going to get this new document window. Now, on the far left side here, there's a bunch of presets that Affinity's created, so you can basically just click on a preset and start working on it without typing any actual dimensions in. The important things to note here is you have a preview window on the right side here, and as you move it, you'll see the preview changes a little bit. Your portrait and landscape buttons are up here. So right now we're in portrait. I could flip it over to landscape, and you'll see that reflect in the preview. Now, down here we have these tabs. The layout tab is going to give you your page width and height, where you can create your own custom size, and it has your document units. So I could switch this from inches to pixels, and when I change this here, let's go 6,000 by 1,000. You'll see it reflected up here in the preview window, so it'll look like that. You also have an option to create an artboard, which we'll go over later. You have a color tab, and the important things here are, if your color format, you can go from RGB to CMYK if you're doing print stuff, and you can also start your document with a transparent background. So right now you'll notice in the preview, it is white. When I click this, it's going to go to a checkerboard, which means there is no background. You're starting with a transparent background. You also have options to create your margins, your bleed if you're working with some print stuff, and a scale option as well. So only other thing to note here, I would say, is you can add a new preset. So you could type in your dimensions you wanted to use. You could go down here to add a new preset or save a preset. So when you come back every single time, you can go to that particular document. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick FHD 1080 in landscape mode just to get started. There's no wrong answer here. Once you're done that, we can just click create. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the interface. Now, if you're new to this, don't let it overwhelm you. We're going to break it up into 4 different parts, so it's a little bit easier to understand. We're going to start on the far left side. These are your tools, and think of them just like that. It's a toolbox. You're going to use one of your tools, and when you're done, you're going to go back and you're going to get another tool. And it's basically where everything is stored, all your tools. It's basically as simple as that. In the middle, this is your canvas. So this is what your final product essentially is going to look like. When you design something, whether it's text or graphics or images, when you export it, this is what you and other people are going to see. On the far right side, these are your panels. They include things like your brushes and your layers. You have effects and masks. We'll go over all that stuff later, but just know these are your panels. And the very top is your tool refinement bar, which also includes your personas, which we will go over later. Don't worry. So let's go into what each of these does really quickly. So let's start again with the tools on the far left. So important things to know here. If I put my mouse over top of a tool, it's going to tell me what the tool is, and in brackets next to it, it's going to tell me what the shortcut is. So this is called the contour tool, and if I wanted to just quickly hit something on my keyboard as a shortcut, I would hit O. This is the pen tool. Same thing. If I wanted to get to it quickly, I just hit P on my keyboard. Another important thing to note here is some of these tools you'll find they have these little arrows, these little triangles pointing down, and what that means is there's more tools in here. Now, Affinity has put them together, grouped them the same or similar to fit more on the toolbar. So if you see a little arrow pointing down on some of these tools, that means there's more tools in there, and they may work in conjunction with the tool that's being displayed. So in the middle, again, this is your canvas. So anything I create, so let's just say I wanted to create a shape and draw it out here, and I exported this. This is what people would see. I'd be considered a genius, and I could probably sell this to some art gallery for $8 million. So that's your canvas. On the right-hand side, these are your panels. So again, you have the little things here. You have layers, you have brushes, you have your quick effects, and down in the bottom is where your masks and your adjustments and your effects are. We're going to go over all that stuff, so don't worry, a little bit more in depth. But this is important to know. Your colors are also at the top. And finally, we'll go to the refinement toolbar at the top. So we talked about the toolbar or your tools at first. Now, basically what this does is it allows you to refine your tools a little bit further. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to grab the pen tool over here on my left-hand side, or I could hit P on my keyboard. When I do that, you'll notice at the very top, the tools, the options up here change. Now I'm going to pick another tool. You'll see again, the options at the top change. They change again. So for example, if I wanted to grab the pen tool, I could add a stroke to it. I could make the line thicker, and basically I could just refine my tool a little bit further for what I was looking for. Finally, at the top, you have these personas, and we'll go over this later, but you're mainly working in the designer persona. There's also the pixel persona, which is really cool, but we will go over all that later. So this is your interface. Tools on the far left, your canvas in the middle, your panels on the right, and your refinement toolbar at the top. One last thing to note here. You can grab these panels and things and kind of configure it however you want. So sometimes you pull a panel out and you delete it or you remove it or something's lost, you can't find it. So the best way to do that is to reset your studio back to default. To do that, you go up to Window, Studio, and click Reset Studio. When I do that, everything is going to pop back into place and go back to normal. So that's your interface. Let's move on. Okay, so just a couple quick things I want to point out before we go forward, which I think are important. Number one is in your tools is using the move tool. So it's right here in the top left, and it's V on your keyboard as a shortcut. And that's essentially how you're going to move or resize almost anything in Designer. So I'm just going to quickly draw out a triangle here. And now that I've drawn it out, I'm going to go back to my move tool here or hit V on my keyboard. And that's going to allow me to resize or rotate. So I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to move it around. And I'll go over this later again, but when you're going to resize a shape or text, if you just click on it and move it, it's not going to stay proportional. It's going to move around on you. But if you hold Shift while you move the shape, it will stay proportional the whole time. Now I'm going to go over that again, so don't worry about it. I just want to point that out quickly how the move tool works, and you're going to be using it very, very often. Next up, I want to talk about zooming in and zooming out. So let me just draw something out here, something fantastic like this. Now, if I wanted to zoom in, I could go up to View, Zoom, and pick zoom in or zoom out. But you notice to the right, there's shortcuts, and you'll want to get familiar with these ones, at least this one anyways. So I'm on a Mac, so I would hit Command plus or Command minus to zoom in and out. If you're on a PC, you're going to hit Control plus or Control minus. I'll throw that up on the screen, but it's just a quick way to zoom in and to zoom out. Another thing I want to note very quickly is moving around the canvas. So if you, say I was zoomed in and I wanted to go see what was over here, I would have to zoom out and go over there. That's not always helpful. So if you hold space on your keyboard, you'll see my pointer changes to a little hand. And that means I can drag around the canvas while I have it held. So that's helpful when you're working on a design and you're trying to get around the canvas quicker without having to zoom in and zoom out. Last thing I want to show you, and don't worry about this, again, I'm going to go over this later, but I just want to point it out in the layers panel to the right here. All your stuff, whatever you create, is in the layers panel, but you have these little toggle buttons to turn things on and turn them off. It doesn't mean you're deleting them. It just means they're hiding. So I got two examples of text here. One says hide me and one says don't hide me. So the one that says hide me, I'm just going to go to this little toggle button here and click it off. And that just means it's hidden. It doesn't mean it's gone. It's not deleted. It's still there. It's just something to know in the layers panel once we get to it. Again, don't worry. We're going to go over all this stuff. I just wanted to point that out quickly. Let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about changing color because, well, that's going to be important. Two places by default to change your color in Affinity Designer. You can do it in the top right corner over here. You can also change it in the bottom left corner over here. I personally like the one in the top right because all the options are right here and available to me, but that's just me. Important things to note here. In the top right corner, you have this little hamburger menu. So right now we're using something called the color wheel by default, but if you like using these sliders like this, you can select it here, or if you want to use boxes or you want to use tint, you can just make that selection there. I'm going to go back to the color wheel. Where do you put in RGB hex codes? Well, I'm so glad you asked. You put them right here. There's a little box here where you can put a hex code in, and that will pop up that color for you. Now, the best way to show you colors is by adding a shape. Now, we're going to go over shapes later, how to modify them and alter them, but the best way to show you is by grabbing a shape. So what I'm going to do is go over to my tools here. I'm just going to grab this rectangle tool right here. I'm just going to click and drag out a rectangle. Wow, that is fancy. But I want to change the color of it. So you'll notice here on the right-hand side, this is called the layers panel. We're going to go over this, don't worry. But I've got this selected. It's this little rectangle here. I'm going to go to my color wheel, and these circles up here are important because this circle here is a little bit lower and it's sitting at the front. This is my fill color. So if I move this around right now, it's going to change the color of my shape. This would be the same thing for text. Now, the one in the back here is my stroke color. My stroke color is kind of like an outline. So if I click on that, it's going to come to the forefront. Now you'll notice that it's in the front, but it's a little bit higher than this blue circle. So right now I have this selected. So now if I pick a color, and let's say I went to black, Now you'll see I have this outline around my rectangle. Now, this third little circle here, what are you doing? What are you all about? Well, basically this is to remove a color. So right now, I've got my rectangle selected. My circle here is to the forefront, my stroke. If I click here, now my fill is going to come to the front, but I want to get rid of this stroke. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click on this little box here, and then my stroke will be gone. So that's how you change your colors. Make sure your shape is selected. If I went right now and I went to my color wheel and I was trying to move it around, you'll see it's changing the stroke color because my stroke is selected. I want to change the fill color. So I got to make sure that I've clicked on that. It's sitting at the forefront, and then that will allow me to change colors. Wow, that was fantastic. You're a genius. We're doing great. Let's move on to the next part. Next up, we're going to talk about layers. Now, layers are super important because it affects how your design is going to look. What's at the top, what's at the bottom, what's in the middle, and how they interact with each other. Now, your layers panel is over here on the right-hand side, and you'll see right now there's nothing in it. Now, anything you add by default in Designer, whether it's a shape or it's text or you use your pen tool, it's going to create a new layer for you, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's go over to our shapes, and let's grab a rectangle here. I'm just going to click on that and drag out a square. Let's make it a square. And now you'll see in the layers panel, it's showing me that there's a red rectangle, and here's a little preview of it, and it's called rectangle by default. But here's what you can do. You can rename it. So I'm going to rename this rectangle Steve. Hey, Steve. And he's just hanging out by himself over here. Let's go grab another shape and add it to the layers panel. So I'm going to grab a circle right here from my tool bar here, my tools, and I'm just going to click and drag out a circle. And you can see by default, it's now sitting in the layers panel right above Steve here. And I don't like the color. I don't want it to be red because I want them to look different. So I got my shape selected. I'm going to go up to my color wheel here. My fill is selected right there. And I'm just going to change it to this kind of blue. Cool. So now we've got a blue circle and a red square, aka Steve. And let's grab one more. So I'm going to go over and grab a triangle. I'm just going to click and drag that out. And again, I don't like the color to match this circle. So let's make it something different. I'm going to make it, let's say, yellow. So here's why layers matter. Right now, if you look in the layers panel, we have the triangle at the top, the blue circle in the middle, and we got Steve at the bottom. Now, if I were to move Steve into the middle, you'll see that the blue circle is on top of him. And if I were to grab the triangle, it's going to be on top of all of them because it is sitting in the top of the layer stack. So think of it like a sandwich. Whatever's at the top, you're going to see. Whatever's below it, and then whatever is at the bottom is going to be at the bottom. Now, if I made this smaller and I put him down here, you wouldn't even see Steve anymore. He'd be hiding. He'd be hidden. He'd be alone. He'd be scared. He'd be cold. I don't know. But you can move things around in your layers panel. So I'm going to grab Steve here. I'm going to click, hold it. I'm just going to drag him up to the top. And you see a little blue line there. I'm just going to let it go. And now he's at the very top. So you can move these around depending on how you want them. You can drag it to the middle. You can drag it down below. We're going to go over layers a little bit more advanced later, but just this is the basic understanding of how layers work, just so you understand when you're working with different things, how they're interacting with each other, why you can or cannot see them. So that's layers. Let's move on. Okay, so next we're going to start talking about some of the tools in Designer. I'm going to go over some of the important ones, but I'm not going to go in depth on each of them because this is a quick start guide, so I kind of just want you to understand what they do and how to use them. And just a reminder, if your screen doesn't look like mine, you can always go up to Window, Studio, and select Reset Studio to reset everything back to default. First tool we're going to talk about is the tool right here, the Artboard tool. And the purpose of this basically is from going to a single design like this to kind of a multi-page design. So you can see a bunch of different stuff laid out at once. If you're working with colors or brands or designs, it's really helpful. So let's click on the Artboard tool. And when I do that, I'm just going to click and drag out an artboard. And when I do that, you see my screen changes. It says Artboard 1 in the top left. And you'll notice in the layers panel now, it's also created a layer called Artboard 1. And my Artboard tool is still selected. So I'm going to click over here and drag out a box here. And Artboard 2 appears in the layers panel. And when I click the next one, it's going to be Artboard 3, which appears in the layers panel. Now, the idea here is, let's just say we were working with a colors or a company. I'm going to drag out a circle here. And let's just say we were working with a company called, I don't know, DJ. And let's make this a little bit bigger. You'll notice now in the layers panel under Artboard 1, if I use this little arrow, these are now embedded onto Artboard 1. Now, let's say I wanted to go to Artboard 2 and I wanted to drag out a circle, but I wanted to make it gray. And I also wanted to use the same text, DJ, here, so I could see what it looked like gray. And if I wanted to go to Artboard 3, I could do the same thing. You'll see under Artboard 2 now, all that stuff is contained within Artboard 2. And if I just wanted to get the colors down here on Artboard 3, I can do that as well, just so I get kind of an idea of how things are going to get laid out, or if I wanted to show the client how things looked in color or in black and white, if I wanted to do different mock-ups, this is where I would do it. So that is the purpose and power of the Artboard tool. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next tool, which is the Node tool, which is right here. Node tool is super important. It's for editing existing curves and shapes to really make something unique. And I will just show you that really quickly. You can do it with text as well. So let's start with the shape. I'm going to grab this triangle. I'm going to draw it out here. Let's make it a different color. And right now, if I want to do anything with this triangle, I can basically just rotate it. I can resize it. I could recolor it, but that's about it. But if you look at the very top toolbar, there's an option here that says Convert to Curves. If I click on that and you look at the layers panel as well, so I'm going to click on this. If you pay attention to the layers panel, it goes from a triangle to a curve. Now, if I go with my node tool selected, you'll see when I move my mouse around the shape, I get these different options, which allows me to kind of move this shape around a little bit different. It also allows me to add points. So say I went here and there's a little line, I could click, and now it's going to let me move this shape around. I can add another point here and move it around. So the node tool allows you to edit existing shapes to create kind of new designs. I'll show you with text as well. So I'm just going to write hello, right? So what we'll do is type that out. And again, because this is text, I want to convert it to curves first. So it's up here. I got my text selected. I'm going to click Convert to Curves. When I do that, you'll see in the Layers panel, my curve has changed every letter into a particular curve. So I'm going to go back to my node tool. And now when I click on this, you can see these lines, these existing lines that I can move around to change it, or I can also add lines. Click on this one. So you can really make some really unique, different stuff by adding your own nodes and moving them around, or using the existing ones to make a different shape. And one more thing on this would be when you use the pen tool, which we'll get to shortly. So I'm going to go to my pen tool, which is right here, and I'm just going to draw out a shape. So I'm just clicking my mouse around and around and around, and just going to close the shape right here. And I'm going to give it a color. So I'll give it this color right here. So now I have this shape. Now this is already a curve. If you look in the layers panel, I drew this out manually with my pen tool. So this is already vector. This is a curve. So now if I go to my node tool again, I can click on that. And again, I can edit these existing shapes, or I can click on them and move them around to make them more unique. So node tool is very important. There's quite a bit to it, but that is the basics. Basically, you create something or use something existing. If it's not a curve, you create it into a curve, and then you can add nodes or edit the existing ones to make a new shape. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the contour tool, which is right here. It's O on your keyboard as a shortcut, and this tool essentially allows you to offset a stroke of some text or a curve or a shape, and I'll show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do first is just grab a square here. I'm going to click and draw that out. Then I'm going to select this contour tool. And when I do that, you'll see my mouse changes, and if I start moving this around, you'll see the original outline still there. If I make it smaller, as I start to go outside the line, you'll see the shape kind of changes a little bit. Options to change up here, you have contour type. So it's already rounded. I could square this off in this particular shape, or I could bevel it. And there's also this option over here, fill, where you can do kind of a knockout and make it force open to make it a different shape as well. When you're done with the shape and you think it's good, you could also do this thing called bake appearance at the top here. And when I do that, you'll see in the layers panel, it goes from a rectangle and changes to a curve. Once it's a curve, I could grab my node tool and then I could move this around to make this shape something different. One more thing I want to show you about this is merging some shapes together. So I'm going to grab a circle and I'm just going to draw it out. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this circle. Now in your layers panel to duplicate, if you're on a Mac, you can hit Command J. If you're on a PC, you can hit Control J, and that will duplicate it in the layers panel. I'm going to drag that one out here. And what I'm going to do now is I can select them both in the layers panel by holding Shift, or I can just take my mouse and drag over top of both of them to highlight both of them. Once they're both highlighted, I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to select Create Compound. And when I do that, you're going to now see in the layers panel, I have this compound, and you can see the two circles are embedded in there. So now that I have the compound selected, I'm going to go to my contour tool again, and you'll see if I start moving it, they kind of go back and forth together in sequence as I move it. So one of the neat things now here, if I go now to my compound and I select one of them, and my contour tool is still selected, and I start moving my circle towards it, it creates this kind of a cool shape. It's kind of merged them together and made this particular shape. From there, you could go and do a bunch of different things, but I just wanted to show you this is kind of one of the cool things it does with merging shapes and making some cool different stuff. So that was the contour tool. Okay, so next up, we're going to be talking about the corner tool, and that's what it is. The shortcut is C, and basically the idea of it is to round out sharp corners. And I'll just quickly show you. I'm going to draw out a square here, and now I'm going to grab the corner tool right here. Again, the shortcut is C, and my mouse changes, and from here, I can basically just click a corner and drag it out to form a new shape. There's some more things you can do with it that are more advanced, but this is the idea of the corner tool, to take a geometric shape and change it into something different. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the pen tool in Designer, which is one of the most important tools you're going to use. It's P on your keyboard. I have a full video of this on the pen tool and Affinity Photo, which is very similar. The pen tool is really in-depth and a bit hard to get a hold of. So if you want a really more in-depth video, check that one out. But we're going to go over everything you need to know to get started here. So I got my pen tool selected. The things you're worried about here is the stroke color, which is right here. Mine's set to blue. The width slider bar, it decides how thick the line actually is. Right now mine is set to, let's say, 20, and it maxes out at 100, this bar, but you can go to this box and type in whatever number you want. So let's go, I'll put mine at 30, let's say. Then you're worried about these modes. There's pen mode, which is standard. You'll be in that most of the time. There's smart mode, where it's supposed to follow your line. Polygon mode, straight line, and there's one called rubber band mode, which I really like. So what I'm going to do with my pen selected, I'm just going to draw out a shape here. So I'm just going to draw this out, clicking random lines here. And you'll see when I finish the shape, now in the layers panel, there's a curve it's created. Now this curve, I could move it around, I could resize it, I can rotate it, I could change its color, I could go back up to the width slider here and I can make it bigger or smaller. So that is that. Now you notice, because it's a curve, if I double click on it, the node tool pops up, and the node tool will allow me again to change this shape a little bit further. I can add my own, move it around, and that's the basics of using that one. I want to show you using rubber band mode really quick. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to turn on this apple here. And what I'm going to do is grab my pen again. I'm going to bring my width slider down quite a bit. I'm going to change the color to something different. Maybe let's change it to black here. And I'm going to use rubber band mode, and I'm going to show you how you can kind of see rubber band mode is here, how it shows you where the line is. So I'm going to click here. Right now I have a straight line, but the cool thing about the pen tool is I could click, say, here, and I can drag my mouse like this. I can use these handles to move it whatever way I want. They're called Bezier handles. So let's say I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this really quickly. And what I meant by rubber band mode, you can kind of see where the line's going to go already before you do it. So I'll click here, maybe like this. I'm just going to do this super fast. It's not going to be fantastic, that's for sure. And I'll just trace around this apple really quick here. Just clicking, holding, and dragging it out. Like this, all the way around. And again, this is rubber band mode, so this kind of shows you where the line is going to go, which makes it a little bit easier. So for tracing or whatever. So now we have an outline on that apple that we've drawn out using the pen tool. So again, the pen tool, P on your keyboard. The things you're worried about is your stroke color right here, your width slider on how big it's going to be, and your mode, whether it's pen mode with rubber band mode or you go to smart mode. You can play with one and see which one works for you, but that is the pen tool. Okay, next up we are talking about the vector brush tool. So it's a paintbrush, and the shortcut is B on your keyboard. And the important things to know about this are, number one is your settings for your paintbrush. So at the very top here, you have a width slider, and that basically means how big your brush is going to display. So right now it's at 310, it's pretty big. If I grab this slider and I slide it down and come back, you'll see that the circle gets smaller. If I slide it back up, it's going to get bigger again. So I'll also note too, you can control your paintbrush size, at least on US or North American keyboards. If you hit the left bracket key, your brush gets smaller. If you hit your right bracket key, your brush will get bigger. Another thing to note here is opacity. Now, opacity just means how transparent it is, and I'll show you what I mean. So first, let's just do a paint stroke. So I'm going to go back to the vector brush here, and I'm just going to do a stroke here. And you can see right now the brush width is 246.8 and the opacity is 100%. If I bring this opacity down to, let's say, I don't know, let's pick 40% and do the same stroke, you can see that it's faded. It doesn't even look really like the same color because it's half transparent or 60% transparent. So that's an important thing to know. The other important thing to know is where your brushes actually are. So over by default, above your in your layers panel here, there's a brushes button right here. So if you click on that, it's going to give you a list of brushes. Now, Affinity gives you a bunch by default. I have some other ones installed, but you can just go through, pick another paintbrush, and then when you do a stroke, your brush will look different depending on whatever brush you have picked. So there's a couple different things here with using a stabilizer and using rope mode, and I'll let you play with that because you can honestly hit the more button here and change so many settings on your brush and make it a completely different looking brush that it would take a long time to explain all that. So play with the paintbrush, but those are the basics. Be on your keyboard as a shortcut. Control the size of it with your width slider or use the left and right bracket keys on your keyboard. And the opacity essentially is how transparent the brush is going to look. And you can change your brushes at the brushes panel here next to layers by default. Okay, so next we are talking about the knife tool, which is right here. The shortcut is K, and it's used just for that, for cutting stuff. You can cut shapes, you can cut text. Let's do a quick example. I'm going to draw out some text here, and I'm going to write, I don't know, H-Town. I don't know where that came from, or I think that's Houston in the States. I don't know. Anyways, so now I've got this text here, and what I'm going to do is grab my knife tool right here. And now that my knife is selected, you can see it's changed to like a little knife. And the options up here that you need to worry about are if you want to make a straight line, you want to auto close. Stabilizer just does that. It stabilizes it a little bit as you're trying to draw. And there's rope mode, which I like, which kind of drags along as you're doing. And there's also this thing called window mode. But let's get started here. So I'm just basically taking this knife, I'm clicking, and I'm dragging across the text. I'm going to go right down the middle. And now before I let go, if you look in the layers panel, right now it just says H-Town, it's just text. When I let go of my mouse, it's going to change to a group. And if I click the arrow down here, it's basically separated all the text from top to bottom. So I'm going to go back to my move tool, and I'm just going to click on the top pieces here. I'm going to hold shift as I click all these top pieces, and I'm just going to move them up. So you can see I've actually cut it right in half. Another thing I quickly want to show you is the scissor, which pops up when you're using the knife tool as well. So I'm going to select this H again, this top of this H. I'm going to go back to my knife tool, and you'll see when I move around certain times, I get this little scissor that pops up. And what it does is it allows you to cut out pieces. So I'm going to put a cut here, I'm going to put a scissor here, and a scissor here, and now it's going to cut out this little piece. So the scissor tool is kind of built in with the knife tool, but that's the essentially how it works. You can take a shape or text, cut it in any which way into any different piece. It'll create a new curve, and you can edit it from there. So shortcut is K, that's the knife tool. Okay, next up, we're talking about the gradient tool, which is right here. It is G on your keyboard, and a gradient is essentially blending a couple different colors together in a background or text or shape to give it more of a unique look. So let's do that really quick. I'm going to grab a shape here, I'm going to grab a square and just draw it out. And now that I have my shape drawn out and selected, I'm going to go to the gradient tool right here, or hit G on my keyboard, and my mouse is going to change, and I can basically draw my gradient out from any way, top, bottom, side. I'm going to start from the top and go down. And you can see when I do that, I have a circle at the top, I have a circle at the bottom, and I have this line in the middle. And this line in the middle allows me to control the gradient. So if I pull it down, it looks more like the natural color. If I pull it up, it looks more like the darker color on the bottom. So the things to note here are the type of gradient. You can change how the gradient looks right here by picking a different kind of actual gradient type. You'll see it change a little bit. I'm going to go back to linear, and to change the colors, you're going to click right here. And when I click on that, this box comes up. This line in the middle is the same thing we used earlier, just to go back and forth and control the strength of each color. And you can change these colors. So say I wanted to change this one down here to a different color. I'm going to click on this little dot here. I'm going to click on color right here. My color wheel is going to come up. I'm going to pick another color, and you'll see it change in real time here. I'll make it something like that. And again, I can control how it works. And I can also add another gradient, another color in here. So say I wanted to add one, I could go insert. It's going to give me another color. I can click on that dot, go back to color, and then I can add another color in there. This is not the best looking gradient you've ever seen, but that's how you can control your gradient. If you were to do that and then come back to it, you can always go up here to fill and then change your gradient and delete things or remove them as you see fit. So that is the gradient tool. You can apply those to shapes and to text as well. Okay, next up we have this tool here, which is the transparency tool. It's Y in your keyboard as a shortcut, and it's a way to fade things essentially. So let's grab a circle here. I'm just going to click, drag it out. And now that I have it selected, I'm going to go to my transparency tool right here. And you can drag this again in any direction, just like a gradient, but I'm going to go from top down to the bottom. And you can see as it goes down, it fades. I have this bar in the middle, which will allow me to control how strong that actual fade is. And I can change this as well, depending on what kind of look that I'm going for. So that's, it can be done with text and shapes, but that's basic and pictures as well. But this is the main idea of the transparency tool. Okay, so these next few I'm going to go over pretty quickly here. The next one here is called the Place tool. And this is essentially if you want to bring a picture or something in from your computer, you would click on this. It's going to ask you where in your computer it is, and you can bring it in. You could also do this by going up to File, Place, and that will do the exact same thing. That's just basically a shortcut in the toolbar here. The next one is called the Vector Crop tool. And that's if you had something like a shape. Let's make a shape like this. And I clicked on the Vector Crop tool. It'll give me these little lines here, and I can adjust the vector crop as to, whatever I was looking for. And it's valuable depending on what you're working with, but that's the main idea of it. And last on shapes, I know we've already done shapes, but I just want to highlight again. When you draw out a shape, if you don't hold shift, it's kind of freehand as to how you're creating the shape. It's going to go a bit wonky, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's not going to stay in proportion. If I hold shift while I drag out a circle, like I'm doing now, and whether I make it bigger or smaller, it's going to stay completely proportional. And that no matter what shape you're using, that's how that is going to work. So those are just those three tools really quickly. Also in shapes, I want to point out here, the triangle has a little triangle in the corner, which means there's more pre-made shapes down here that Affinity has created and added in there for you. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the Shape Builder tool, which is right here. The shortcut is S on your keyboard, and it's a way to take shapes, separate shapes, and combine them into more complex shapes. And I'll show you quickly how that works. So let's just grab a circle, and I'm going to drag that out. And let me just grab a rectangle. I'll draw that out, and I'm just going to change the color. And I'm going to select both these shapes at the same time. So I could either hold shift on my layers panel and select them all, or I could just take my mouse and drag over top of both of them so they're both highlighted. From here, I'm going to grab the Shape Builder tool, and I have my options up here. So the action there is I can add shapes together. I can subtract shapes. There's drag methods and cleanup methods. We'll just do something quick. We're going to add these shapes together. So now that I have the plus symbol selected, you'll see when I put my mouse over these lines appear over top. So if I just click my mouse and drag across, now this has become one shape. If you look in the layers panel now, it's become a curve, and it is now one shape using the Shape Builder tool. So let's just do one where we subtract just to show you quickly how that works too. Again, I'm going to draw a circle. I'm going to draw another rectangle. Let's make it this color. Do something like that. And I'm going to highlight both by clicking my mouse and dragging over top of both of them. I'm going to grab the Shape Builder tool. And this time I'm going to hit the action. I'm going to minus. I'm going to delete a selected area. And you see I have my options are showing up in red. So there's this piece, and there's this piece. I'm going to minus this piece out of here. So now you can see in my layers panel, I have two different shapes going, but it has created its own new shape based off of what I have removed. So the Shape Builder tool, really cool to create complex shapes and put things together. You can obviously get really, really advanced with this. This is just a basic example how it works. Okay, so adding text. In your toolbar, you will either see this A with a square around it or this T. They are the Artistic Text tool and the Frame Text tool. Now, the Artistic Text tool is more for titles and headlines, and the Frame Text tool is for more like sentences and paragraphs. And let's do a quick example. If I click on the Artistic Text tool, my mouse is going to change to a target with an A, and I'm going to type, hey, buddy, and that's my title. And then now, if I go back here and I select the Frame Text tool, my mouse changes to a target with a T, and it allows me to freehand draw out a box. So I'm going to draw it to about here. And then from here, I can either type text in there, or I can cut and paste text in there. I'm going to put some filler text in there so you can see how it works. So to add some filler text, just go up to Text, Insert Filler Text. I'm just going to fill it with some gibberish. And just to show you, when you move the box here, the text will flow with the box depending on however you have it adjusted. So again, the Artistic Text tool here is for headlines and titles, larger text, and the Frame Text tool is for paragraphs and longer sentences. Okay, so the last two tools we're going to talk about are right down here, and they are the color picker tool and the style picker tool. I don't know why I can't say that. I've tried to record this too many times, I think. So the color one I like to use up in the top right corner, right here. I just think it's easier, but that's just me. And the idea of this is you can basically grab it, hover over a color, and then grab that color so you can apply it to something else. So let's say I wanted to take this circle and I wanted to apply this blue to it. What I'm going to do is grab the tool from the top right corner, click, hold, drag it over top, and you can see it's highlighting whatever color in the top right as I'm moving around, whatever color it sees. I'm going to grab this blue, release my mouse. It's now been assigned to the tool in the top right corner. I'm going to click on the circle where I want the color to be applied to, and then click on it again, and now applied that blue right here. Now let's try to get this blue onto this purple circle here. So I'm going to click on the circle. That looks good. Grab my tool, drag it down on top of the blue that I want, release my mouse. It's been applied. Click on the circle, click on it, and then now I've applied that blue. So that is the color picker tool. And let's move on to the style. Let's get rid of these. And the style one works like this. I'm going to draw out a circle, and I'm going to make these two look different. So let's make this like that and change the stroke to maybe something like this. And I'll draw out another circle. And I'm going to change this one so it doesn't look the same at all. Let's change the color to this, and we'll change this to yellow. Sure, whatever. Okay, so we have these two things. They're both just circles. So let's go down and grab that tool. And the first thing I would note here is always up here, make sure you might want to unload it. And the reason I say that is if you've been using this previously, it remembers the last thing and it'll start applying a style that is from a previous project, and it might be confused. So I'm going to click unload just to get rid of it. And the idea here is I want this circle to look like this circle. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this circle to load it. So now it knows what I want. I'm going to go over to this one, click, and now it's been applied to the same style. So those two tools are really handy. I would use the color one in the top right. That's just what I like. And just make sure when you load up the style one, you unload first if you see it, just so you don't load a previous setting. Okay, so I just quickly want to talk about advanced layers because it's great to understand the basics, but to really go to the next level, you should really understand some clipping and a couple things. So we'll make this fast. Let me first draw out a circle. I'll draw out this yellow circle, and then I'm going to draw out a triangle. I'm going to make the triangle, let's say, blue. Now, right now in the layers panel, you can see I have two layers. I have this circle at the bottom and this triangle on the top. But say I wanted to clip this triangle inside to follow it around wherever it goes. What I could do is click on this triangle, hold it over top of the circle and let it go, and then I can just move it around inside. So you'll see now I have this arrow that points down. This means this triangle is clipped inside of this circle. So I can move it around, I can still resize it, I can do whatever I want, but it's bound inside that circle. And if I click on the circle, I can move the circle around, I can resize it, and it's going to follow me wherever I go. Now, layer hierarchy still matters. So if I were to grab another shape, let's say I grabbed a square and drag that out. And right now you can see it's sitting above where these are clipped in. So it's not embedded inside. I could click, let it go, hold it on top, and now it's embedded inside. But because the square is sitting above the triangle, it's still showing above. So if I wanted to bring it below, I could still drag that below. And then now you would have this. I want to show you a quick example of something that happens occasionally, so you want to be aware of it. So let's say I wanted to drag this triangle inside of here. Make sure when you click and hold, you drag it and put it over top of the whole layer, more to the right. If you try to drag it and hold it on this thumbnail, which it'll let you do, it does something different. You can see here, it kind of does like a masking technique, and that's usually not what you're looking for. It's not wrong. It's probably just not what you're trying to do. So make sure you go to the right of the little thumbnail there so it clips in properly. I also quickly want to show you grouping. So I've got a circle. I'm going to create a few more circles like this. And now you can see 3 separate circles in the layers panel. And a quick way to do, if you're moving things around or resizing them at the same time, is to group them. So I could click and highlight all of these or highlight them all with my mouse. I could right click in the layers panel and I could pick group. Now that they're grouped, it's created its own little folder. They're each still in there, so I can move them still individually. But if I click on the group folder, I can move them around and I can resize them all at one time. So grouping is helpful. A couple other things I quickly want to point out in this layers panel is there is opacity here in 2 different places. So I can click opacity here, which again, if you remember, is transparency. I could click and I could drag down the transparency at each layer, depending on what I'm going for. Opacity is up here as well. It's the same thing, and I want to show you a quick trick here that's kind of hidden. So if you click on this little button right here for opacity, it says switch. If you click on it, it flips to something for noise. If you know what noise is, it makes things kind of look kind of grainy. So right now the noise is at 0. I'll kind of crank this up. And now you can see it's gotten really grainy. So this is with none, and that's full. So that's just a quick hidden little thing there that's in the layers panel, switching between noise and opacity at the top there. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a couple things that you'll always find in the over in the panels over here. The first thing we're going to talk about are blend modes, and blend modes are located right here on the top of your layers panel. And essentially what they do is they interact with whatever's above them or below them color-wise. So I'll just give you a quick example. I brought the picture in of this brick wall, and what I'm going to do is draw out some circles. And I'm just going to draw out some circles really quick. I'm going to keep them all the same color. And I'm going to show you when you change blend modes what they look like. So let's click on this one first. I'm going to go up to blend modes, and as you see as I go through them, it's going to look different with how it interacts with the surface below it. So right now I'm picking multiply for this one. This next one I'll pick, let's say, lighten. This next one I'm going to pick, let's say, screen. This one I'll pick hard mix. This one is exclusion. And this one, let's just pick another one. Let's do color. So as you can see here, I have 6 different circles, and all of them now, even though they're the same color, they look totally different because they're interacting with the surface below them. So blend modes are really cool to come up with some unique looking stuff to make it look like things are written on walls or on t-shirts. So your blend modes, again, at the top of your layers panel, and how they interact with surfaces above and below them to actually change the blend. Okay, so now I want to talk about adjustments, which are located down here at the bottom of the layers panel. And this is a way to add effects like black and white. You can mess with the exposure, you can mess with the levels, and we'll do a couple quick examples. So I've got my layer selected here. I'm going down to my adjustments, clicking here, and there's a whole list of them here. And the important thing to know here is that these are non-destructive. So if you make a change and you don't like it, you can always change it or delete it. So I'm going to pick, let's say, black and white for this one. And you can see when I do it now in the layers panel, the black and white adjustment has been clipped inside of the photo. Now, if by chance I had a bunch of stuff in my layers and this went to the above and it was affecting everything below it, I can just click on the adjustment and just drag it in here. So from here, I get this little box, and now I can make adjustments to the photo how I see fit or how I want it to look. I can reset it up here if I don't like it, and I can always delete it. So say I was working on the photo and I came back later and I realized I didn't like the levels, I wanted to change them. I could always click on this and just adjust it here, or I could just totally delete it and get rid of it. We'll do one more here. I'll do something else. So let's just pick a recolor, which recolors the whole photo. Again, you can see it's clipped in, and I can change how it's going to look. I can change a blend mode down here to see how it affects it to really, really kind of go for something artistic or whatever I'm looking for. And again, if I don't like the settings, I can reset them back. And if I don't like it at all, I can totally delete it. So that is adjustments. Okay, so now we're going to talk about adding some effects to shapes and to text. And your effects are down here at the bottom of your layers panel right here. And what we'll do is just a quick example. I'm going to grab my text tool right here, and I'm just going to write, hey, out like this. And with it selected, I'm going to go down to my effects, click on them. I'm going to get this window that pops up. Now you notice there's all kinds of effects here: outline, 3D, inner shadow. Some of them have a plus and a little X here. What that means is you can add multiple of them. So let's do an outline. I'm going to click on outline. I get this window here that's going to make me change some options. And right now I have the color set to black for my outline. I'm going to pull up the radius. You're going to see a black outline appear. Now I can go to the plus button, add a second outline. I'm going to change the color on this one to say, let's make it red so you can see it. And I'll drag that up. And now you can see it has 2 outlines. So if I didn't like this, I could hit this X and get rid of it. But yeah, you can go through, click on any one of these effects, change the color, and then mess with the radius and the intensity to get a look that you're going for. So that's the effects panel. This can be done, again, to both shapes and to text. Okay, so now we're going to quickly talk about the warp tool, and it's pretty cool. I'm going to grab some text here, and I'm just going to type out warp like this. And your warp tool is at the bottom here of your layers panel, right here. And when you click on it, it's going to give you all these different options to use. So I'm just going to pick quad first, and you'll see I can move these nodes around to make my text look a little bit different. And up in the top left corner now, you can see the warp is set to quad. And now you can change these to different styles that are sort of preset. And once you pick a preset that you like, you can also still pull these further and warp them a little bit more. So the warp tool is a lot of fun. You play around with it and find something you like, and you can also, reset it if you don't like it and change your settings from there. But that is the warp tool located at the bottom of the layers panel. Okay, so lastly in the layers panel over here, I just want to touch on a few quick things just to wrap this up. Number one is I didn't talk about this button down here, the mask layer button. Now masking is really important and it's a bit in depth. So I recommend, I'm going to link a video down below on masking because you could watch probably a solid 10-minute video on it alone to grasp it. Once you do, super powerful, you're going to love it. So that's the mask layer. These three buttons over here. So there's one called add layer. Now this is if you want to add your own layer without Designer doing it. And this is for vector stuff. If you draw with your pen tool or something like that. There's also one next to it called add pixel layer, and that's for pixel stuff. I'll go over that quickly in the pixel persona one in the next section here, but this is for adding pixel stuff. And finally, you have the remove layer if you don't like it. You can either hit delete on your keyboard or just hit that button down there. Okay, so now I just got to take a few minutes to talk about the pixel persona. Now, pixel persona is awesome because it's like having a mini Affinity photo built right into Designer. So on the top left corner, when you launch the program, normally you're in the Designer persona, which allows you to work with all your vector stuff, but you also have this pixel persona. And you'll notice on the left-hand side where all my tools are, if I click on this persona, now my tools change and it gives me more options, which lets me take my design further or to another level. So if I go back to the Designer persona, and let's just say I wanted to remove this guy from the background because it's just a guy standing in front of sort of a gray background. There's no tools in Designer to do that, but there is in the pixel persona. So if I click on this, and in this particular case, I'm going to use a tool called the selection brush tool. If I click on that, what I'm going to do is just start painting over this guy, and Affinity is going to do its best to try and detect what is the background and what's the foreground. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to refine my selection. I picked an easy choice here just for this example, but if you want to learn more about this tool or any of the pixel persona tools, you can watch my Affinity photo video, which is like free, of course, and in depth on how to use this stuff and make perfect selections. So I'm going to select this guy. And once this does its thing, he's been selected. He's now been isolated from the background. So now I can move him around and there's no background. So I can go back now to the Designer persona if I wish. And I could start adding stuff behind him like colors. I could put this color behind him, drag it underneath. I could add text. I could do whatever I wanted because now I have him isolated from the background. One other thing that I will say that I really like about, that's awful design, by the way. What I like about the pixel persona is you get to use pixel brushes. When you're in the Designer persona, you're using vector brushes, which are cool. But I think there's some limits to them. Once you go to the pixel persona, you get options to use pixel brushes, which are more defined. They're great for details, shadows, more realistic type stuff. And my favorite brushes, I'm linking them below, are the Retro Supply brushes. Anything Retro Supply, they're overlays, they're brushes, all their bundles. If you want to support the channel, use that link and buy the best stuff for Affinity Photo, Designer, and Publisher. So that's quickly the pixel persona. You can flip between the two to take your design level, to another level, depending on what you're looking for. Okay, so to wrap everything up here, I just want to talk about exporting really quickly and a few small things. So say I have this document, I'm ready to export it so I can send it to someone or show somebody. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to File, Export. And from here, in this dropdown, all my options are here. So I can pick whatever I want. I can also pick PSD if I wanted to export to a Photoshop file by chance. Here's the size of the file. If I wanted to change this, there's a little link here. This means right now it's linked, so it's automatically going to resize it for me. So if I just picked right now, just say I put 3000, this box is automatically going to resize. It's going to ratio it for me. If I uncheck this, it's going to let me make a custom size. So that's how you export a document. Now, if I wanted to export this document, you can see right now I have these 5 circles, but there's a white background. So say I started a document, I didn't start it with a transparent background, but I actually wanted to export it with a transparent background. What I could do or I could also resize my document this way, is by clicking on Document Setup here, or I can go to File, Document Setup, and for a transparent background, on my color, I could click Transparent Background and hit OK. Then you'll see I'll get that checkerboard behind it. So now if I went up to File, Export, and I select PNG, you'd see I would have that background there. Or sorry, no background. So that's it for me. I'm going to wrap this up now. It took a little bit longer than I hoped, but I hope this was helpful. If it was, please do me a favor and hit that tap, 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 that like button. And if you've never seen my stuff before, why don't you join our Design Method gang, not an actual gang. We hang out and we talk about our hopes and dreams in our we read each other our diaries. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.